Hey there folks, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Today we're going to be coming back to Remnant 2 to announce that the Beyond Hell mod project is back in development after like a 16-month hiatus. So today I do want to talk about what Beyond Hell has to offer, what it is, and what we kind of hope it to be, and hopefully drum up some excitement for this project. So let's not waste too much time and let's just get right into this. Like the Remnant from Hell mod, the previous overhaul project we had done for Remnant 1, Beyond Hell aims to create the same dynamic changes for Remnant 2, and of course bring some life back into this game. This is going to include large sweeping changes to many Remnant 2 systems and mechanics in attempts to rebalance the game and bring in some more added difficulty, as the power creep kinda got out of hand with the last DLC in Remnant 2, plus we want to just put our own little spin and flair on everything. So let's briefly just cover what's changed or added to give you an idea of what Beyond Hell is. Starting with the game difficulty, we've increased the enemy spawn rates to have more hordes of enemies that'll keep players on their toes throughout most of the zones. This will force players to keep a keen eye out on their surroundings and stay on top of everything. We're also going to be removing survival difficulty, and veteran will become the default difficulty. We're also adding Beyond Hell difficulty after Apocalypse, and this is going to be slightly increasing the health of bosses and the damage of non-boss enemies. This way bosses aren't going to be hitting even harder and getting into like their one-tap potential even more, because that doesn't sound like a good idea, but also it's going to make fights a little bit more longer, whereas grunt enemies will still die very fast, but they're going to hit a little bit harder, making them still very scary if not managed. We've also done a complete overhaul of boss modifiers. Some of the more annoying modifiers such as Thick Skin, Regenerator, and Elemental Resistances were either removed or changed to be not so much of an annoyance. Like Elemental Resistance is now a rotating elemental immunity that you can damage and burst, rather than having a generic flat damage loss for the entire fight if you happen to be using Elemental. Or like the Regenerator, which gives bosses gray health now when they're damaged so that they can regen a little bit at a time in smaller chunks, but you can also just keep damaging the boss to whittle that off, preventing them from constantly regenerating HP. We've also made a ton of new custom modifiers to add to the boss pool to make the bosses significantly more random and different to engage. Players will also have the option to opt in for aberration modifiers on bosses as well, further increasing the total pool of mods, making boss fights truly chaotic and rather unique this time around. There's a lot more potential for things to go wrong and have a bunch of modifiers that may be a little too much to handle when paired together, but honestly, I don't think that's part of the fun. To help with this newly added chaos, we've got some help from our dearly departed friend, Jack Driver. Lost on Yasha and forced to survive on his own, Jack Driver was truly an inspiration to us all. Though he unfortunately succumbed to the root on Yasha, Jack Driver's memoirs will still let his spirit live on. Written in his memoirs, Jack Driver will guide us in the lost ways of the soldier, giving us knowledge and insight of the pre-Root War civilization, and allowing us access to the knowledge to create high-impact ammunition and military-grade explosives. The soldier has flash grenades to help stun and still enemies, they can focus fire enemies and grant allies weak spot damage, and they can carry explosive ammunition to allow your guns to deal extra splash damage. This is our first new archetype added in Beyond Hell, with plenty of support, utility, and damage to get the job done solo or in groups, because it wouldn't be a good mod without new content, right? But wait, there's still more. And from the Labyrinth, a new hero stepped in front of the Root. Armed with the power to manipulate time, the Chronomancer will surely put a halt to the Root's progress. The Chronomancer has the ability to slow enemies, hasten allies, and control time, so they'll surely destroy the Root before they even knew what hit them. The Chronomancer archetype will fit its way into nearly any build, supporting nearly any playstyle with the ability to speed up dot application, reset skill and mod cooldowns, and with time manipulation, they have the ability to lock buffs on players and enemies for a duration, or they can slow or hasten pretty much everything around. This is our second newer archetype, and both will fully be playable in Beyond Hell. Regarding the other archetypes in Remnant 2, of course we're going to be making some changes to basically everything. But like everything else, it's all subject to change, and we will be documenting the change logs for sure, so just keep up on that. Some changes do include, like the Gunslinger's Quick Draw will now be affected by ranged modifiers such as range damage and reload speed, rather than skill related modifiers. And also, like the Invader skills will be giving clones on skill use as the default rather than being on the prime perk. And then the big change, archetype damage perks are now multiplicative scalars rather than additive ones, kind of like how the armors were in Remnant 1. Which means that added damage from trinkets, mods, and skills and mutators are no longer going to be diluted by the archetype power pool, and this will greatly increase the viability of flat added damage items, making them more competitive with like crit stacking while not having to nerf any other gear. This is going to indirectly help with things like dots, which didn't have any multiplicative scaling anywhere before, as well as skill and mod damage, which only had the option to go for as much crit as possible because adding more skill damage wasn't really doing anything for them. So all that's going to be changed and your build potentials are going to go through the roof. The Beyond Hell team has also rebalanced all of the weapons in the game. The main principle here is that handguns should be a viable option for damage, as we have many more enemies to deal with and some enemies with more HP, so you're going to need to swap weapons more often, and we want to make that choice matter and feel good. Normally in Remnant 2, handguns are only used for mod or supportive roles because they typically did about half the damage of a long gun would. But in Beyond Hell, handguns will be able to do similar damage to a long gun, and you can even build entirely into your handgun as your primary source of damage if you want. You want to use Hellfire, Meridian, or Nebula? Like, sure, those work now very well on their own. So we've rebalanced the ranged gun gameplay to nerf kind of the top end of hugs that were doing like 10 to 14k DPS to about 7 to 9k DPS. So if you weren't getting those numbers before, trust me, you're not going to notice any nerf. We just thought that the player damage was kind of getting out of control with the last couple updates in Remnant 2, and we wanted to bring that back in line where we were around in DLC 1. So yes, some weapons did get a little bit of a nerf, but as you can see from the spreadsheet, most of them were buffed. Pretty much every long gun is in the 7 to 9k damage range. That's kind of like the sweet spot and where we're balancing around. And even the handguns are still capable of doing about 6 to 7k damage, which is going to make them much stronger and more viable than they were before. Try not to get hung up too hard about the nerfs because everything that was already great before is still great. We've just made a lot more weapons closer and more competitive with the top of the line. Because you also have to remember that, we gave Archetypes multiplicative damage modifiers, which made everything significantly stronger than before. And trust me, it's not all doom, gloom, and nerfs here in Beyond Hell. One of the biggest changes to Beyond Hell is the rework to the Prism system, and we're kind of proud of this one. We've added new fusion fragments for things that were once lost, such as elemental damage, reduced mod costs, and reduced melee stamina costs, so you can now try to get those on your prisms as well. We've also entirely overhauled the legendary fragment system. We think that legendary fragments were overall pretty boring, just being flat stats here or there, but they offered an insane amount of power creep for players in the forms of huge amounts of flat damage from sharpshooter or jack of all trades, and brutality, which also got amplified by our multiplicative scaling archetypes, so it just got a little too much. So we've taken all the legendary fragments and rebalanced them to be much less about adding power and straight damage stats to a player, but more about adding mechanics to your build and bolstering playstyles that were kind of neglected. And so these can really help shape and define completely new and unique builds. And we can show you some of these fragments that we've been working on, but trust me, there's going to be more to come. Now you might be thinking, oh no, I have to redo all my prisms. And don't worry, we got you covered. Because here in Beyond Hell, the legendary prism fragments are collected by gaining prism shards from bosses in Boss Rush, and then you purchase them at McCabe. These legendary fragments are applied to your currently equipped prism on use and can be used infinitely. They're just, usable items now. So you're free to swap around and rotate your legendary fragments as much as possible and as freely as you'd like. Releveling the prism will still be required to change around the fusion fragments, of course, but honestly, that wasn't the difficult part of leveling prisms anyway, and that does give you something to chase for again. Some smaller things, we've also reintroduced the cold element and the frigid status from Remnant 1. Frostborn makes its way back from Prism, as well as some cold themed items that allow you to apply cold dots to enemy, slow them down, and lower their fire resistance. It's going to be useful for multiple element setups and kind of a pseudo defense there. And of course, what would be a mod without new items? Of course, we got new trinkets, there are plenty of new rings, amulets, relics, and even a new gun to build around and get your creative juices flowing. Builds here in Beyond Hell are going to have many more tools to play with, and your opportunity to create niche and unique builds are going to skyrocket. There's so much more stuff to think about and play with. Trust me, if you're a build creator, this is a mod for you. And so that's what we have so far. The Beyond Hell team is pretty hard at work, but unfortunately work is kind of slow. And so this is kind of where I come to you for assistance. Mod tools in Unreal 5 are still new, complicated, or don't even exist. So trying to edit things like cooked assets without having to rebuild them has been a big problem that we're facing, and it's kind of what's slowing us down a lot. So if anyone listening here is interested in joining the mod team, or you have experience with modding Unreal Engine that can assist, we'd love to get some help. Hell, even if you're just a player that wants to test and provide feedback, we'd want that too. Link to the Damn Side Discord is in the description below. And as you can see, we don't have very many models or icons for items yet, so if anyone is experienced in that field, we'd also love your help. For everyone else, we do have a Beyond Hell channel here in Richie's Dampside Discord where we are developing Beyond Hell. So the test versions will be available there if you'd like, and the GitHub is public if you want to download them as they come out. And if you want to support the project, you can donate directly to Ari Crystal on the Nexus mod page, link to the description of that below. He's the lead developer on this project, and we'll be sure to get the mod on the Nexus soon as it becomes more stable for release. But that's going to be all for me, so thank you all for your time, and good luck out there.